That was whether legalizing marijuana would improve the economy and job creation. I don't know what this says about the online audience, but the answer is no. I don't think that is a good strategy to grow our economy. So.
There's nothing funny about nearly 1 million lives wrecked by a marijuana arrest every year, Mr. President. Politely tell President Obama what you think about legalization by calling the White House at 202-456-1111.
Now it's time for your 420 headline news. I'm Russ Belville. The Supreme Court, in action, boosts the right to record police officers, reporting from the Huffington Post. On Monday, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to review a decision by the 7th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals blocking the enforcement of an Illinois eavesdropping law. The 7th Circuit Court found a specific First Amendment right to record police officers. It's the second federal appeals court to strike down a conviction for recording police. In August of 2011, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit ruled that a man wrongly arrested for recording cops could sue the arresting officers for violating his First Amendment rights. That decision also found a broad First Amendment right to record on-duty government officials in public. Quote, gathering information about government officials in a form that can be readily disseminated to others serves a cardinal First Amendment interest in protecting and promoting the free discussion of government affairs, end quote, from the decision. And in fact, in that it strips police who make such arrests of their immunity from lawsuits, it's an even stronger opinion. The First and Seventh Circuit decisions mean that it is now technically legal to record on-duty police officers in every state in the country. Medical marijuana laws may put officials at risk, says the Congressional Research Service, this from fiercegovernment.com. While state medical marijuana laws are legally valid, they may expose state officials to federal criminal liability, says the Congressional Research Service, since federal sanctions also apply to those, quote, who conspire, aid, and abet or assist, end quote, in the possession, production, or distribution of marijuana. For example, a state law that requires officials to return medical marijuana improperly seized from a qualified individual could qualify as a felony under the Controlled Substances Act, says the report. The 10th Amendment stops Congress from forcing states to enact specific laws or using state resources to enforce federal laws, but doesn't necessarily afford protections for actions that violate federal laws. An accountant's indictment tossed in a medical pot case from SanFranciscoGate.com, sfgate.com. Federal prosecutors unlawfully obtained an indictment against a Missoula medical marijuana provider's accountant by using statements she made when she was immune from prosecution, a judge has ruled. U.S. District Judge Dana Christensen threw out the indictment against Lisa Fleming on Tuesday. Fleming was the accountant for Jason Washington, a former Montana Grizzlies quarterback who ran Big Sky Health until his arrest last year in a federal crackdown on large medical marijuana providers. Washington's trial is scheduled for December 10th. If it goes forward, Washington will be only the second medical marijuana provider to stand trial as a result of the long-running crackdown on large medical marijuana operations that has netted dozens of providers. The first, Chris Williams of Helena, was convicted of 8 drug and gun charges and faces a possible prison term of 80 years or more when he is sentenced in January. New Jersey patients hopeful that the last hurdle has been cleared for medical marijuana. This from Philly.com. New Jersey health officials were upbeat on the day they announced that they were creating a long-awaited patient registry allowing seriously ill people to receive medical marijuana. Within a couple of weeks, they predicted, eligible patients would be able to buy marijuana from the state's first dispensary, Greenleaf Compassion Center. That was more than 3 months ago. For many patients, the last 90 days of waiting have been especially trying. They paid their $200 registration fee in August, their photo IDs arrived the next month by FedEx, and then silence. So far, 318 patients have enrolled in the state's program. An additional 138 are still getting their doctors to certify their eligibility or have not yet paid the fee. Health officials said patients won't be credited for lost months. There was a delay when the state required Greenleaf to submit its plants for testing for fungus, pesticides, and potency. The Christie administration wanted THC, the euphoria-producing ingredient in the drug, to be reduced to 10% to prevent abuse. Feds demand marijuana records from a Northern California county. This from San Jose Mercury News. Federal investigators are demanding records related to a Northern California county's medical marijuana permitting program. Mendocino County Sheriff Tom Allman told local news outlets this week that county officials received a subpoena in October from the U.S. Attorney's Office in San Francisco. The records request is connected to the county's now canceled program to authorize certain marijuana growers to grow as many as 99 plants, exceeding the local limit of 25 plants. The permitting process garnered more than $800,000 in county fees in its 2-year existence. Officials canceled the program in January after the U.S. Attorney's Office threatened legal action. And that's your 420 headline news for today, Wednesday, November 28th, 2012. I'm Russ Belville. When we come back, we go behind the headlines at the latest normal National Board of Directors meeting and the vote on Executive Director Alan St. Pierre.
I'm Sub Cool from Team Green Avenger. At TGAgenetics.com, we are working on the leading edge of medical strains. Our strains are rigorously tested for THC, CBD, THCV, and other critical cannabinoids. Know your grow. Check out our genetic diversity at TGAgenetics.com, the home of Jelly Bean, Jack the Ripper, Vortex, and other award-winning cannabis strains.
The Russ Belville Show reminds you to never smoke and drive impaired. Hang out for a while. Share.
I think we're back. Take a little trip. Take a little trip. Take a little.
All right, we're taking a little trip behind the headlines here. And if you've been following the show since we did our normal national conference coverage, you may know that the executive director of NORML, the longest serving executive director in not just drug reform nonprofit history, but as far as I know, in nonprofit history. He may be the longest serving executive director in nonprofit history. Since 1994, I believe, Alan St. Pierre has been the head of the NORML Foundation, and in 2000 or 2001 became the head of NORML. This national conference that just recently took place brought to a head some conflicts that had concerned some of the members of the board of directors. And I was there in the hallway when I heard a couple of the members of the board fighting over this very issue and expressing the fact that it would have to be brought up at the full board of directors meeting, that the executive committee could not just take unilateral action. And the unilateral action that was proposed by the executive committee was the formation of a board to begin a search for a new executive director, or in other words, to replace Alan St. Pierre. St. Pierre was very non-responsive at the conference when I attempted to talk to him about this. He gave a very fiery speech to close the national conference, which we have up on our YouTube website at Radical Russ on YouTube, just youtube.com/Radical Russ, in which he expressed he had reached a nadir, or a low point, in working with NORML. Now, a couple of these points that led to what would be called the nadir have to do with information that was published on Steve Bloom's Celeb Stoner blog, celebstoner.com, and they were remarks that were part of a private conversation on the NORML Legal Committee listserv. Now, if you don't know about this, NORML's legal committee is pretty much the heart and soul of NORML. It's about 500 different lawyers from across the country who pay a regular fee to NORML, an annual fee, to be a part of the legal committee, which gets their names listed in NORML's national listing. So no matter what state you're in, if you needed a marijuana lawyer, they've got the hookup for you in whatever state you may be. Part of that is a listserv, an email group, if you will, to collaborate on various legal defenses and theories among these lawyers. So if, say, a lawyer in Kansas figures out a novel new way to beat a drug dog search, he can communicate with a lawyer in Kentucky and explain how he did it. So this listserv had been a long part of this community. Now, as it turns out, part of the debate that went on this listserv had a lot to do with what I could describe as kind of a divide between East Coast and West Coast activists. On the West Coast, we've had medical marijuana since 1996. We have a much more liberal population with respect to marijuana and marijuana culture. And so as the medical marijuana industry has formed in California and Colorado mostly, a lot of lawyers have become involved with that in helping their clients set up their medical marijuana distribution services, their infused product manufacturing services, and so forth. Just basically helping the, shall we say, business side of marijuana. And this has become quite natural and quite expected amongst the normal lawyers and amongst the activists in the medical marijuana states because, of course, a lot of the people involved with medical marijuana are legalizers. They want to, just get marijuana legalized out and out. On the East Coast, there is a different phenomenon going on, and that is the fact that they live in a more restrictive area. It's becoming less restrictive, but more restrictive, more culturally against marijuana. And as these reporters and activists and legislators look westward, and they hear the stories coming eastward about medical marijuana, they hear about the multi-pound bus of cars driving from California or Colorado loaded down with medical marijuana. They see the hyperbolic reports on TV news about how easy it is to get a card and how it's de facto legalization. And this scares the hell out of the people out on the east side of the country, and especially in the South or even in the Midwest. And so that leads the activists on that side of the country to have kind of a disrespectful attitude, if you will, toward the medical marijuana industry in some respects. And mostly in the respect of it being kind of just a way of getting around marijuana not being legal. Well, that attitude came to a boil in a discussion that was going down on the normal legal committee list, wherein in response to someone defending California dispensaries and some of the excesses that are going on there, you might say, or you might express it as just people, following the law, since it's such a liberally written law. But in response to that, Alan St. Pierre wrote in an email a very spirited explanation as to how he found medical marijuana and defending the industry these days to be, and in his words, quote, a fraud and a sham. And he compared it to people that wrote medicinal alcohol prescriptions during Prohibition. This caused a big firestorm on the normal legal committee list. What got written there got published on Steve Bloom's celebstoner.com blog. And between that and a renewed interest in moderating the list to prevent the negative comments from boiling up about the medical marijuana comments, there was a call for whether or not Alan St. Pierre should be replaced as the executive director. And I'm here to report the latest update we've gotten from the Boston Pot Report, and I believe from one of the board members who's in tune with that Boston Pot Report, is that Alan St. Pierre has been retained by the normal board of directors in a 8-6 vote with one abstention. So from the 16-member board, of course, he can't vote on himself. So out of the 15 left, 8 votes for and 6 votes against. So Alan St. Pierre retains his position as the executive director of the country's oldest and most respected marijuana legalization organization. Well, some people get to keep their jobs, I suppose. I think it's about time to take a break. Thankfully, Brian's here, and it looks like he's got something break-worthy. So,
yes.
Stick around. We'll be right back.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would sell you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
Hi, this is Dan Michaels. If you're looking for professional voice talent for your commercial or podcast, I'm your man. Visit danmichaelsaudio.com for more information. Russ Belville Show. Chat is for friends 18 and older. We expect our chat to be civil, mature, and free from excessive profanity. If you don't like these rules, there are approximately 6 billion other chat rooms with lower standards that you can visit. Everyone knows music and marijuana go together, so let's wind up our 20 after break with the Russ Belville Show's Daily Toker Tunes, the best in pod-safe 420 music from around the web. Today is Irie Wednesday, ska, and other world music genres. You can get downloads and more information about all our Daily Toker Tunes by visiting music.radicalruss.com. Now, sit back and enjoy your Daily Toker Tune.
All right, on Wednesdays, we turn things over to Brian the Red, the host of Red Eyes Reggae Flashback, tonight at 8 o'clock Pacific Time live. So take it away, Red Eyes.
All right, well, coming up here, we got a little sample of the stuff we got for tonight. I was cleaning out some old CDs and things and found an archive of some old dub and things. So we're going to go ahead and get into some random reggae music for smoking.
Coolness. This is Gorilla Finger with Pipe Dreamin'.
Life ain't about cold comfort. legalize it. Don't criticize.
I'm just overjoyed. I've been cannabis activist for 40 years.
We're turning the corner on a failed policy that's been disastrous for our communities, and things are going to get better.
80 years ago, we repealed alcohol prohibition in this state. We did it prior to the federal government, and we're doing the same thing when it comes to marijuana. We are a step ahead, and we will continue to lead the way. It means I'm going to smoke a lot of weed tonight.
Some call it marijuana.
You're listening to Radical Russ on the Russ Belville Show.
Some of them call it ganja. Never mind, legalize.
Marijuana is harmless. That's what everybody says these days. It's fun. It's recreational. Some even call it medicine. But every year, millions of young people find out that marijuana is extremely dangerous. Every year they find out that it's deadly. Marijuana smoke is lethal and toxic. Don't believe anything you've ever heard positive about smoking marijuana. It will kill you. Really. It's really gonna kill you. Don't smoke it. It will really, really kill you. Seriously. It's gonna kill you.
It's time for the Russ Belville Show's Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. Dr. Earlywine is a professor of psychology at the State University of New York at Albany and a leading author and researcher on cannabinoids and health, who pins the Ask Dr. Mitch column for High Times Magazine. Put your questions ready in our live chat or call in to 971-533-7111 now.
All right, everybody, middle of the week, time to get your questions ready for Dr. Mitch Earlywine, who's standing by in New York State. How you doing, Dr. Mitch? Oh, wait a minute. It'll help if I unmute you. Let's try that again. How you doing, Dr. Mitch?
Having a wonderful night.
Too much to concentrate on here. I'm glad you're having a good time, and as we always do here on the show, we remind you can get your live questions in here by joining our chat room. Just type /login and create your account, and you can get your questions in. If you precede them with Q:, it'll make a nice little icon, makes it easy for us to find those questions. Also, you can call in live here at 971-533-7111. At the top of this segment, we always give Dr. Mitch a chance to fill us in on the latest science, news, and polling. So what's up, Dr. Mitch? What's new?
The big news is I've been invited to present at the TEDx Talks in Brooklyn on December 7th. And I've been focusing on that so much, I haven't really been able to pay attention to anything else.
So the TED Talks, I've seen a couple of these on Huffington Post. I just saw one recently. It was a guy who did a virtual choir, had like 1,000 people on YouTube all singing one song. What's your topic? I mean, I imagine it's marijuana related, but what did they ask you to speak specifically about?
It's interesting. I pitched them a thing about marijuana arrests, and they were less excited about that than the idea of humor and building community. So I'm actually going the Humor 101 route.
Oh, excellent.
It's going to be strange to be in front of a crowd and not discussing the cannabis weed, though, I'll tell you.
All right. And that reminds me, of course, you've got the book Humor 101 that's out there in the Psych series. I imagine that's still available. How can people get a copy?
Indeed. So both the Springer website, the Amazon website, and your local brick-and-mortar bookstore. So it's definitely available, and Springer's pretty excited about this talk, as you can imagine.
All right. Looking forward to that. And what I wanted to ask you about before our questions start rolling in from the chat room, just recently we saw here in Portland, the Oregonian did a story on Brave Michaela. She's a 7-year-old medical cannabis patient. She's using it to help treat the effects of chemotherapy that she's undergoing for leukemia. That story got picked up by Huffington Post. And that story got picked up by ABC News and CNN, and now the whole country is talking about Michaela and other kids that are using cannabis for medicinal purposes. I'm just wondering if you've ever met any of the kids, seen this in effect personally, and what research we have, if any, on cannabis and children.
I did meet one child in Los Angeles who was experimenting with some edibles to control what were basically some pretty extreme Aspergery type symptoms, and was having a pretty decent reaction. We don't have tons of long-term data in humans on this. The cannabinoid system is pretty resilient. THC, of course, is not toxic, but we just don't know about the impact on the developing brain. We do have that one data set from Peter Fried, F-R-I-E-D, longitudinal follow-up on some folks who started relatively early in life and saw some modest decreases in IQ, but it's never been replicated, and we're not sure what to make of it. In all honesty, I mean, compared to dying of leukemia, I just can't imagine that a 5-point drop in IQ is anything to really take very seriously.
And as far as, a child that's age 7 going through leukemia, of course, all the pain, the nausea, all the symptoms they're going to face, what are some of the traditional drugs they would recommend for that and some of their side effects?
Well, so, I mean, as we know, the first line of defense a lot of times with pain are either these prostaglandin-based drugs like aspirin that are supposed to just reduce swelling and kind of hope for the best, or moving to the opiate drugs, which unfortunately we develop tolerance to pretty rapidly, and we have some pretty aversive and odd nausea, as well as the legendary constipation. In fact, that's what the opiates were first used for, was to prevent diarrhea. And so it's not that they don't have any brain effects either, but you're sort of just trading one set of side effects for this potential cannabis-related maybe problem. I honestly can't tell somebody to turn to an opiate when the plant could probably do just as well.
One of the confounding situations in trying to present this issue, and it comes up, and I can kind of feel the mainstream media pushing this angle, maybe subtly, is they point out that the mom and the stepdad in Michaela's case are both cannabis users themselves, and they try to make this subtle implication that this is really just a bunch of adult cannabis users that are using their kid in order to get through a medical marijuana program. I don't know how to phrase this into a question other than to say, what do we know about people that have, chosen medical cannabis as an option for their kid? And statistically speaking, wouldn't it most likely be the ones who had tried it themselves?
Well, it's funny because I had that sense from the way the media has covered this as well. But who would think of using cannabis as a medicine first, right? If you're already primed, if you already view the plant as potentially beneficial, why wouldn't you think of it first, right? And we've seen this with adults battling cancer, chemotherapy, side effects, and things like that as well. The folks who are not familiar with the plant, of course, don't think of it. Just like, I don't know anything about opera, so I don't think about opera very much either. But I do know about other forms of music, and I think about them all the time. I kind of feel I just have some angst about the way this is presented as some kind of backdoor route to obtaining cannabis, when it's probably pretty obvious that these parents could access cannabis any way they want without having to go through anything this aversive. And once your child has leukemia, sorry, man, all bets are off.
Yeah.
I feel like they should get to do whatever they need to do to make sure that this child has the best chance possible.
Yeah, and the ABC News story did a good job of going back to a previous interview they had done with Dr. Lester Grinspoon. And, of course, no better authority on using medical cannabis for childhood leukemia than that man.
Well, and Lester's really candid about that, and I feel like sometimes people overweigh that individual case, but they find him so compelling because he lived through it. Mm-hmm. So I would love to have data from 100 people who, had leukemia as children and how they adapted, and I personally think that would be more persuasive. But, man, sometimes just listening to Lester tell that story about one person can be much more moving than any amount of graphs and charts and arrows and boxes.
Yeah, and I kind of think, the corollary to the pot parents with the cannabis kids is the non-pot parents who wouldn't get it for their kids. I spoke to Lindsay Reinhart, and she's fighting for a medical marijuana bill in Idaho. And she talked about how, when I was a teenager, I had tried pot recreationally. And I'm glad that I did, because that helped me realize I'd been lied to about it. And then I was, not afraid to try it when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So, I mean, how many kids out there that their minds get poisoned by the DARE program later become adults that could benefit from medical cannabis, but will never try it because of the fear-mongering?
Well, and I know you've talked to Urban Rosenfeld about this in the past. I mean, he was Captain Drug-Free America as a teen, and then suddenly realized with the strange bone tumors he has, there was just no other way. He really needed to have this. And I think he would have gotten into it a little earlier had we not been in the midst of some of the fear-mongering we had back in the 70s.
All right. Well, we're going to get some questions here from our chat room. Guido in the chat room brings up a good point, and it references this that Dunedin study, that New Zealand study, and this is being brought up by the opponents of, oh my God, they're giving kids medical marijuana, who say, look at this study. They studied all these people, and they found there was an 8-point drop in IQ. If they used it when they were before age 15, they dropped 8 points in IQ. And so Guido wants to know, is that even really statistically significant?
Well, what's funny about statistical significance is if you get a big enough sample, you could make a 2-point drop in IQ statistically significant, because it's a product of both the sample size and the size of the effect. Now, I will be the first to admit 8 points of IQ is a lot of IQ, and we all want to have as much as we can. But some of those tests, when you look closely at that study, aren't really what we call fluid intelligence, aren't really how fast do you learn and how much do you learn. It's stuff that you were supposed to have picked up by that age. Now, I will also be the first to admit that during, immediately after cannabis use, the hippocampus is not firing in the same way, and you're not going to absorb new material. So if any of these kids were at school high, they did not remember the lessons well, and if that component was on the IQ test, which like the vocabulary section of the IQ test, of course, then they're going to miss it. And it may not be because of some inherent brain damage so much as they literally did not learn the thing they were supposed to learn because they were high in class.
Oh, so like in a sense, if the IQ test was asking, who was president during the Civil War, and you were stoned at that point and didn't commit that to memory, that doesn't necessarily mean that later on in life, reading a book about the Civil War, you would not understand it or not mentally grasp what's going on. It's a question
And in fact, you may learn just as fast as anyone else, but that's not what that part of the test is testing. What is better is often those block design type tasks, or a task that's foreign that you have to learn a new skill. And then I can see how rapidly do you learn. And unfortunately, they did not publish the data in a way to help me separate that out. So the crystallized intelligence, the stuff that you should have learned by now, is kind of confounded with the fluid intelligence, the how rapidly do you learn in a given setting. And we really don't know if cannabis has a negative impact on that or not.
Something that I was looking into when I was younger was something called conditioned learning, because my father was kind of wary about me consuming cannabis for my, my medical reasons, my anxiety, my depression, my anger issues. And he said that there was something called conditioned learning, that if you learn something while in a slightly altered state, then you're going to remember it just fine or be able to do that activity just fine in that altered state. But, when you're in a different, when you're not in that zone as it is, in your...
Yeah, the bottom line on this was anything you learned high, you're supposed to recall better only when you're high. But the data on basically state-dependent learning, as it's known formally, are not as strong as we were led to believe in, say, intro psych textbooks. Oh. So even the impact of caffeine on state-dependent learning, which was one of the ones that they used to make a big deal out of, is really pretty hard to replicate. And we don't have any data on state-dependent learning with cannabis, despite how popular this notion is. But odds are high, if there's something you want to know, go learn it. By all means, I'm sure you can.
Yeah, there's a lot of information out there. I found so much when I've been doing my medical research, helping with patients. But, yeah. definitely.
All right, thanks for that. And Dr. Mitch, we got another question from the chat room. We'll have to wrap it up here. We're getting close to the end. And folks, if you didn't get a chance to get your question in, or you want to just be more private about it, you can always email Dr. Mitch in confidence at 420research@gmail.com. That's 420research@gmail.com. Just Lily from our chat room wants to know, what is your response to those like Kevin Sabat who say we need to turn cannabis into pills so that we can have consistency and so that the FDA can regulate it?
Kevin, bless his heart, he really needs our love, doesn't he? I mean, the poor guy, who would say that with a straight face? If this were a toxic substance where there's a lethal dose and you really have to be worried about that, I completely understand the argument. But we're not talking about cyanide. We're talking about a plant with a 5,000-year history of safety. We're talking about plants that we can actually test ourselves now and get an estimate of THC concentration and tell people that. Do we really need to have it turn into something you swallow, particularly if you're going to use it for nausea and vomiting, where you want that impact to be within seconds, not within hours? We need the vaporizer. We need the plant cannabis. We need something we can rely on to have an immediate impact so that the symptoms can disappear as quickly as possible.
So one of the things that I bring up is the oncoming pharmaceuticalization of cannabis and how we've got the different companies that are synthesizing all the cannabinoids, and they are going to get it into, self-titrating type dosages where, like an inhaler or a spray sublingually. So once we have that, once we have the extracted, measured, dosed, cannabis products that work as well as cannabis, what arguments will we have for keeping the whole plant?
In all honesty, it kind of reminds me of back when the first George Bush was told that broccoli is good for you, and he said, well, go find the thing in broccoli that's good for you because I don't like broccoli. Right? Yeah. Here's a plant with at least 60 novel compounds, the cannabinoids. We have no idea what's going on. We're going to have THC by itself or THC and cannabidiol mix. Why go through all this effort, for one thing, kind of begs the question. But also, I think it's unlikely that one strain, two strains, never mind one cannabinoid, two cannabinoids, will have all the medical properties that the whole plant has. When you talk to Steph Scherer or somebody, who's really appreciative of the fact that we have a variety of subspecies is so important because we have so many different symptoms that people need treatment for. I just shudder at the thought that there would be one pharmaceutical company that would have control over two cannabinoids, and we would say that would replace the plant.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think somebody in our chat room also hit the nail on the head with just one word: price.
Alas, but, even when, Marinol goes generic, it's going to be $3 to $5 a pill for what should be about a dime's worth of cannabis.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mitch, for joining us every Wednesday here on our Cannabis Q&A segment. We appreciate it more than you'll ever know.
Have a great week.
All right, folks. When we come back, we got time for a little bit of radical ranting. Stick around. It's the Russ Belville Show. Check us out on RadicalRuss.com.
We'll be right back after these messages from our 420 friendly sponsors. Support these advertisers because their ad money goes straight to the Russ Belville Show. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Tokers, there's no good reason to get your dog stoned. While it might not harm them physically, imagine being a dog who already begs for treats all day, and then imagine that dog having the munchies. Not cool.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson, and I need your help. Our marijuana laws are terribly unfair, and they make criminals out of law-abiding citizens. Nearly 2,000 Americans are arrested every day on marijuana charges. And we are unfairly destroying the lives and careers of hundreds of thousands of people simply because they smoke marijuana. These are not criminals. They are average citizens like you, good neighbors who work hard, raise families, pay taxes, and contribute to their communities. And it's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. We need your help to end marijuana prohibition once and for all. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORMAL, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at NOR.
I got my ticket, but it's no good around here. Fascists.
It's a travesty. It's a travesty.
You want answers?
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended the Shaolin Temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical rant. Now that marijuana legalization has passed in 2 states, it will be interesting to see how the battle for medical marijuana plays out in the legislatures and initiatives nationwide. As the movement started in the 1990s, opponents claimed that it was the camel's nose under the tent for legalization. Medical marijuana is just a Trojan horse, they called it. Well, if it was a Trojan horse, it was made out of glass, because medical marijuana is marijuana legalization. It's just for a limited subset of the consumers, that's all. Still, there's a gap of about 30% of the people between the 80% that support medical marijuana nationwide and the 50% that support legalization nationwide. That gap of about 30% of the people who can look the other way if it's a cancer patient smoking a joint, but they feel compelled to punish a healthy person if they're using marijuana. But now that we have 2 marijuana states, 2 legal marijuana states that started off as medical marijuana states, it's going to make that argument about, no, really, it's just for the sick people. That's going to be a really hard talking point to sustain, isn't it? Unless medical marijuana reformers go out of their way to make sure that it really is only for the sick people by ensuring that only the very sickest can get it after clearing some very high hurdles. Now that, in a nutshell, is the theory of the medical marijuana box canyon. It's the idea that if you fight only for medical marijuana, marijuana has to become increasingly medical. Medical marijuana laws have to become increasingly restrictive in order to keep the potheads out. It's a look at the trends in medical marijuana legislation from 1996 to 2012, where we went from California, with hardly any limits at all, where almost anyone can get medical marijuana, to New Jersey, where it's been almost 3 years since the law passed, and patients who've just recently gotten their registry cards are forbidden to grow at home. They have no place yet to shop for medicine. When they do, there will only be 6 dispensaries in the entire state of 9 million people. And they will have a choice of just 3 varieties of medical marijuana, all with less than 10% THC per strain. It also takes into account the rapidly developing field of cannabinoid pharmaceuticals, the development and approval of which will neuter much of the argument for medical marijuana as a plant that patients grow for themselves. When patients can get a spray or an inhaler that works as well, works as fast as marijuana, and is legal and covered by health insurance, what incentive will there be for passing a medical marijuana law or initiative? Now, certainly medical marijuana in Colorado and in Washington opened people's minds to a different frame of marijuana, something other than dope. And that did help to pass marijuana legalization. It should be noted, however, that in both states, it was activists always dedicated to marijuana legalization, and not just medical marijuana, who led the successful legalization campaigns. And it should be noted that the primary opposition to the legalization campaigns came from the activists who've always been devoted primarily to medical marijuana. The box canyon isn't just that medical marijuana gets stricter and that we're driving our issue into the hands of big pharma. It's also that we've intentionally divided our political base and created an interest group vested in keeping us in the medical marijuana canyon. I can't think of a single legalizer that ever campaigned against a medical marijuana law, but I can name plenty of medicalizers who campaigned against a legalization law. It's also fostered in that interest group an almost holy reverence for marijuana that precludes rational compromise for political gain. In previous posts on the Box Canyon, I've noted how possession limits that are 1.5 pounds in the Pacific Northwest have dwindled to 1 or 2 ounces in the latest medical marijuana states. Where most states allow patients to grow some plants for themselves, the latest states force patients to shop at dispensaries. Chronic pain in the latest states gets harder and harder to qualify for. However, there have been some improvements as of late in medical marijuana bills. Most of the newer bills include protections for patients against discrimination in employment, housing, child custody, and organ transplants. Many are excluding patients from DUID charges for marijuana metabolites. Some are including reciprocity for other states' medical marijuana patients to protect them from arrest when they visit. These are all superior clauses to what can be found in the earliest medical marijuana states. The problem is that most Western patients would have trouble qualifying for medical marijuana under these newer laws. So, what's happening now? Well, let's take a look. We got 4 states currently have medical marijuana bills in play and a bunch of others that are working on it. Illinois is looking at a medical marijuana bill right now that allows 2 ounces of possession and 3 mature and 3 immature plants. The bad news is they've copied Oregon's absurd definition that any plant that is larger than 12 inches tall or wider than 12 inches around is a mature plant, even if it's not budding. Yes, that's the Oregon rule, the 12-inch rule we call it. The Illinois proposal also contains the usual qualifying conditions, things like cancer, HIV, glaucoma, AIDS, and so forth. But chronic pain and nausea can only qualify if you've tried every other option first, and they've failed. Or as I call it, cannabis can only be the medicine of last resort for pain and nausea. The Illinois bill also features reciprocity. This is a good thing for out-of-state patients. It protects against the discriminations in the employment, child custody, organ transplants, and so forth, so that's good. It does have some amendments to the bill, though, that include a 3-year sunset clause, which means that medical marijuana will exist for at least 3 years. At the end of 3 years, if the legislature doesn't reapprove it, patients will go back to being criminals. Yeah, Illinois is looking at a bill that would allow really, really sick people to get relief for 3 years and then might lose it. They might have to go back to being criminals. Amazing. They also have an amendment in the bill for prohibition of driving within 12 hours of using cannabis. If you use cannabis within 12 hours, you're not allowed to drive. So if you wake up that day and I guess if you went to sleep, that would be 8 hours. And then if you spent the first 4 hours of your morning in pain, then you'd be allowed to drive. Okay, got it? And it also includes it forbids dispensaries from making campaign contributions. Why? Why in the world will we forbid dispensaries from making campaign contributions? I'll tell you why. Because that's what they have always feared about marijuana. It's not the fact that marijuana would be legal or people would be using it. It's that the people who support marijuana might have money and political power and might fight for further gains and further liberalization of marijuana laws. That's the only reason they would put this in the Illinois law, to prevent these lawful companies, these lawful organizations from making campaign contributions. It also would set up a non-refundable $5,000 application fee for a dispensary, plus another $20,000 for a license. So you got to bet, you got to turn in your application with $5,000, and you may or may not get a dispensary. They might just reject it, and you're out $5,000. So that's the Box Canyon, folks. That's where things get more and more and more restrictive in an effort to try to keep the potheads out. It just makes it harder and harder for legitimate patients to qualify. Let's look at the other states. In New York, patients could possess 2.5 ounces in the bill that they're considering, but could only grow up to 12 plants if they live more than 25 miles away from a dispensary. This is the HALO rule that MPP created for the Arizona 2010 medical marijuana law. Thanks to that provision, patients in Phoenix and Tucson, who have been growing for 2 years now, are forced to take down their gardens because dispensaries have finally been approved for those cities. And there's no grandfather clause for the people who have already been growing. They had their right to grow, and now they lose it because somebody else needs to make money. And when I asked MPP's representatives about why they had this HALO rule for the Arizona law, they actually replied by saying the dispensaries needed to have a viable customer base. Yeah. Like somebody who sets up a shop to sell marijuana is in danger of not doing good business. They need to have a captive audience. That was the explanation. But also in the New York rule, they've also included a hardship provision. So if you're really poor or you have some other hardship, you can still be allowed to grow your plants, even if you live within the HALO. In Ohio, they're looking at a medical marijuana bill that is very broad, actually, with 6 ounces of possession. Actually, it's 200 grams of possession and 12 plants allowed, including a scientifically accurate description of what a mature plant is. One that actually is budding. It also includes all the standard conditions for medical marijuana qualification and a few that are not included in the early medical marijuana states. It also includes reciprocity and most of the discrimination protections except for the one on organ transplants. If Ohio's medical marijuana were to pass, this would repudiate the Box Canyon theory because this is actually a more liberal law than most medical marijuana laws. And finally, in Pennsylvania, they're considering a bill that would allow for 1 ounce and 6 plants. And it also includes dispensaries. It includes the standard list of qualifying conditions, but would provide patients nothing in the way of discrimination protections. That's the Box Canyon 3 post, Trends in Medical Marijuana Legislation. You can find that at our blog at radicalruss.com, including links back to those 4 states' bills, Illinois, New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, if you'd like to read them for yourself and find out what they're including in their medical marijuana considerations. Now, the Box Canyon theory is not to say that all states should back away from doing medical marijuana. There's going to be some states where it's the only possible way forward, and I totally understand that. But I truly believe in the West, it is time to stop tinkering around with medical marijuana in California and Oregon especially, and move full bore into legalization of marijuana for all people. Let's end the discrimination against all people who use cannabis. All use is none. Thanks for joining us here for the Russ Belville Show. Those of you listening on the podcast, thanks for joining us. We're going to turn into Hour 2, which is also available as a podcast for our VIP members. If you go to radicalruss.com/donate, you can sign up for your VIP membership, which gives you access to all of the Hour 2 Toker Talk Radio downloads, as well as access to the daily Toker Tune downloads at radicalruss.com. For Brian the Red, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. Stick around for Hour 2. We got a whole lot more to talk about. And until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it.